Hi there, welcome to Hello World for Songwriting. In this talk, I'll demonstrate how to use GarageBand, this here, the built-in macOS digital audio workstation, also known as a DAW, to create a simple song. We'll use GarageBand's arrangement markers and drummer plugin to create a rhythmic scaffolding for the song. We'll build onto that structure by learning a bit about practical music theory, focused on the major scale and how it can be harmonized to create a palette of chords for use in our composition. We'll also talk a little bit about the mechanics of chord progressions and the practical functions of certain chords as we build the harmonic foundation of our demonstration song. Okay, let's talk a little bit about time. So music is a series of sounds that happened at various points in time. In our DAW, we think of time as moving across the screen from left to right, like this. Now, we coarsely measure time in bars, also known as a measure, and beats. Our song starts here at bar 1, beat 1, and you can see in this display here, it's written as a 1.1, bar 1, beat 1. And as we move ahead in time, you can see it changes. So this is bar 1, beat 2, bar 1, beat 3, bar 1, beat 4, and then here we've arrived at bar 2, beat 1. So before we get started, I'd like to call out some of the default parameters we'll be using for our song in this demonstration. I won't get too deep into many of these topics as we're trying to keep our discussions of music theory in this talk light and focused on practicality, but let's just touch on a few things. So the first thing is the time signature. And you can see it's right here, this in the display, this 4/4. A time signature in a piece of music defines how time is organized. The signature is written as two numbers separated by a slash. The first number defines how many beats exist in the space of one bar. This is bar 1, and it goes all the way to bar 2, and you can see that it goes from bar 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. So that means there are 4 beats in one bar. So bar lines, and these are the bar lines, these vertical lines right here. Bar lines, they're used to sort of see where you are visually in the song's time, and they're sort of like geographical landmarks. Like you can say oh, here at bar 4, we're going to start this awesome, chorus or something like that. But not only do they act as these geographical landmarks, they also help determine how your song feels rhythmically. So if we were to change this from 4/4 to say 5/4, we can see that now there are 5 beats in each bar. Or from 4/4 to, say, 3/4, now there are 3 beats in each bar. Now, 3/4 and 4/4, they have different rhythmic feels, and the reason is because at the start of each bar, known as the downbeat, there's a special emphasis placed on that beat. And here, this is our metronome in our DAW. We can turn it on and turn it off. So it's on right now. If we hit play, we'll be able to hear the metronome count our song as we move forward in time. So now, did you hear that when we hit the start of each bar, the sound was slightly different? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now let's compare that and contrast that with 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 3. Oops. Yeah. Anyway, you get the point. On the downbeat, there's a special emphasis, and that changes the rhythmic feel of the song. Our song is going to be in 4/4 time, which is also known as common time because it is the most common time signature in Western music. Now, in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into what the other 4 means. And finally, we're going to come to the tempo. The tempo of the song is measured in beats per minute, And right now you can see it's set to 120. So that means we're going to get a beat just about every half second. Now, if we change this to 60, our song is going to be much slower and we get a beat every second. Now, our song's pretty lively, so we're going to put this to about 140. And there's one other thing here in this display that I want to talk about. So we've talked about the bars and beats, we've talked about the tempo, we've talked about the time signature. This is the key of the song. And we'll get into keys a little bit later when we start talking about the major scale and chords, but the key of our song is going to be in C major. In Western music, there are 12 pitches, and we can count them on the piano. If we go to our notes section here, you can see I have a little piano here with the pitches on them, and you can see, like, if you count them, these are the notes of the C major scale: C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. And there are 7 from C to B. Now, if you count all of the pitches from C to C, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and notice I'm counting the black keys: 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I don't count this one because it's a C. It's where we started. It's just an octave up. So in Western music, there are 12 pitches, 12 notes on the piano. And the using the key of C, or limiting ourselves to the key of C, basically says that we're going to be using 7 out of the 12 pitches. And these 7 pitches are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C again. This is just an octave higher. So these are the 7 pitches that are considered legal in our song. Now, one of the reasons for using C major is the C. It's easy to remember the notes of the C major scale because there are no sharps or flats. Like if you see a note like D sharp, which would be this black key right here, you can think to yourself, oh, that's not in the key of C because the key of C has no sharps or flats. And it's just easy to remember that way. So that's one of the reasons we're going to be using it. So any notes that have a sharp or flat, like C sharp, are out of bounds for our song because our song is called diatonic, meaning it only uses the 7 notes that exist within the key. Now, when somebody says, hey, you're singing off key, that means you've sung an illegal note. Like if you were supposed to sing an E, if you were supposed to sing a D and you sung a D sharp, for example. All right, we'll get more into this when we start talking about the C major scale and a little bit more about music theory, but let's move on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the song's arrangement, and we're going to go over here and click the notepad off so it doesn't distract us. So we've touched on the default parameters we're using for our song, and these are the default parameters here. You got your tempo, the key your song is in, you got your time signature, and then you got your location and time of where you are in the song. So the arrangement defines the logical structure of your song in sections. These sections have names like intro, verse, and chorus. You know, there are more of these sections, but since this is the hello world of songwriting, we're shooting for a very simple arrangement for our song, a minimum viable product of a song, if you will. So in order to see the structure of our song, we first need to show the arrangement track, which by default is hidden. So we go up to the tracks menu and we say, show arrangement track. Now you can see we've got this section on top that has the arrangement. And this little plus sign lets us create new arrangement markers. So we're going to hit this once, and you can see it's created a gray area. And let me zoom out a little bit. This little slider right here is the horizontal zoom slider, so you can zoom in and out with it. So we're going to zoom out, and you can see that it's created an arrangement marker here called intro. And we can click on the text of this and change it. And we can name it anything we want. These are the default names. You got your intro, your verse, your chorus, your bridge, your outro. Or you can type in something arbitrary, like foo, if you wanted to. But we're going to call this intro. And by default, an arrangement is 8 bars in length. A new arrangement marker is 8 bars in length. So intro is an 8-bar section. So we're going to go with that default, and we're going to hit the plus sign again, and now it's going to create a verse, which is what we want. And then we're going to hit the plus sign again, and it's going to create a chorus. Now, when you have these multiple arrangement markers, you can drag them around and move their order. And if you hold the Option key down while you do it, it copies. So now we have 2 choruses because I dragged it over and copied it. So if we don't hold the Option key down, it moves it. So we're going to move this back to the end. And now our arrangement looks like we have an 8-bar intro, an 8-bar verse, and then 2 8-bar choruses. Now this is what I consider the minimum viable product for a song. You've got a little introduction section, you've got a verse section, and then you've got a chorus and another chorus, and then your song ends. Now you may be wondering how long a song with a very simple arrangement like this is. Well, that depends on the tempo, but it's easy enough to check. So this area here is called the control bar, and you can pop this arrow down, and you can change the control bar from its default, showing the beats and project settings, to time. And now you can see it's changed. And as we go to the end of the song, we can see our song clocks in at around 55 seconds, which is pretty short, under a minute. Now, typically pop songs run between 2.5 and 4 minutes, but short songs are still very useful. For example, let's say you wanted to write a theme song for a video or a podcast or something. It's good to have such songs clock in at under a minute, since they're just a brief introduction. Let's move our control bar back to Beats and Project. Now that we've got our arrangement sorted out, we just need to populate that arrangement with sounds. We'll start by adding drums. The drums in a pop song provide the rhythmic template for the song. They give the listener that beat that they'll tap their foot to while listening, or perhaps unconsciously nod their head to. The drums are like the metronome that I demonstrated earlier, in that they play every beat of the song, as well as emphasizing the first beat of every measure. In the DAW, as we've mentioned, time goes horizontally from left to right. Time advances. But vertically, we have our list of tracks. And a track is an instance of an instrument being played. So you can have multiple tracks here going from top to bottom vertically. And you can have, a piano and some drums and maybe a vocal. That's how you create a song from multiple tracks. So what we're going to do is create a track for our drummer. We're going to do that by hitting the plus sign. And it's going to invite us to select what kind of track we want. You've got your software instrument. That's like a MIDI instrument, like this classic electric piano. You can record yourself singing into a microphone or playing a guitar. You can plug your guitar into an audio interface. Or you can pick a drummer track, which is what we're going to select. So we want the drummer, and we're going to say create. Now, things have changed here, and we can see that we've now created this Bluebird Darcy track, and it's automatically filled in various sections based on our arrangement. Now I'm going to pick up this track and move it to the top just for organizational reasons. And if we scroll, we can see we have an intro drum section going into a verse drum section, to a chorus, and a chorus. So what the drummer track does is it automatically creates appropriate drumming based on your arrangement. And this thing right here is called the library, and you can click it on and click it off. And the library lets you select instruments to be used. And we have this drummer, Darcy, who is the default songwriter drummer. And she plays sort of tasteful drum grooves appropriate for sort of singer-songwriter type songs. So now we can hit the space bar to play, and we can listen to what has been filled into our arrangement. Now this is a restrained sort of intro drumming. And we have the metronome on, which we can turn off. And now we're into the verse. And the verse drumming gets a little livelier. And as we head into the chorus, we expect the drum sound to change. And this just goes on until the end of the chorus. Now, as we get towards the end of the chorus, you can hear what's called a fill. And the fill sort of is like a little drum roll or something that is a segue between two sections. Pretty cool. And we can hit enter to go back to the start of our arrangement. And we're zoomed out. Let's zoom out as far as we can go so we can see the whole thing. We've also got this window down here, which is going to let us configure some things about the drummer. We can also switch drummers. So if we wanted, for example, to go, let's say our song had a sort of a funky groove to it, we could select Levi, and he's going to play slightly different drum sounds. It's a little bit funkier of an intro. And as we move forward into the verse, pretty funky. We're going to stick with Darcy for our song. And we have these controls that can control some more elements of our drum performance. So this knob lets us control the fills. So I mentioned how there are fills in between sections. If you crank this knob up, you can see the drum patterns change a little bit. And now we have fills at the halfway mark in between sections if we crank this up pretty high. But we can turn it back down and we have less fills. Let's just leave it there. Anyway, there's a bunch of things that you can change about the drum performance, but we're just going to stick with the basics. So we're going to click off the library, and we're going to click off this as well. And so now we're back to our song. Now, if we were to save this song right here, we would have a 55-second drum solo, which would not be very interesting. We need to add harmonic and melodic elements to this song to sort of make it feel more like a song. But it is important to have the drums first as a sort of rhythmic framework that we can build upon. And that's what we're going to do next. Okay, now we're going to get into just a touch of practical music theory. This theory is going to help us understand how to construct the harmonic and melodic underpinnings of our song. We're going to start with the major scale. You may have heard it verbalized as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. This is a series of 7 notes that is the foundation of all Western music. There are a lot of different kinds of scales, but they're all described in terms of how they differ from the major scale. So you can think of the major scale as the mother of all scales. When talking about the major scale, it's handy to have a piano keyboard around to illustrate things. The layout of the piano keyboard with its black and white keys has been with us since around the 15th century and has baked into it the C major scale, as I'll demonstrate. If we go up here to the window menu and we pull down Show Musical Typing, we can bring up a piano keyboard that we can access from our computer keyboard. So you can see these keys are labeled A, S, D, F, G, H, J, K, L. This lets us hit piano keys from our computer keyboard. Now, if we go over here and we choose the classic electric piano track, when we hit keys on this keyboard, it'll now play the piano. That is, of course, unless our focus is here in the notepad. Then what happens is we type into the notepad. So when you're trying to type into the musical keyboard here, into the musical typing, you want to make sure your focus is here in the main work area. So from this keyboard, we can play all 12 notes in Western music, and we've counted them before. You got your C, and then you move to your C sharp, which is the black key, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp A sharp B, and then back to C. And they're all here. And then they just repeat again. Here, this is a C, and this is a C an octave up. And in between, you have all 12 notes in Western music. Now, when I said before that the C major scale is baked into the layout of the keyboard, you can see that all of the white keys here down below, there are 7 of them, and they are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then back to C again. This relates to the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. This is the 7 notes in the major scale. So the interval between a C and a C sharp is known as a half step. The interval between C and a D is known as a whole step. And the major scale is defined by its intervals and the relations between the notes. Now, because the piano keyboard represents the major scale on the white keys, that explains why there is no black key here between the notes E and F. Like you never hear anybody say E sharp, because mostly that note does not exist except in theory. We often refer to notes by their number degree rather than their name. So you can see here I have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B in the C major scale, followed by their degree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you may talk about a sequence of notes that goes 1, 4, 5, rather than saying C, F, G. And the reason you do that is because you're abstracting the melody or the series of notes in a key-independent manner. So in the key of C, those notes may be C, F, G, but if you move to a different key, like the key of E, then those notes would be different. But if you use the scale degrees instead of using the note names, it's key independent. You can be in any key and transpose your melody into any key, and it's still the same relations. So we abstract the actual notes to their degrees just to make it more portable to different keys. And this is a little bit confusing, but underneath here I also have which key on your computer keyboard you hit to get this particular note. So in order to hit the note C, you actually press the key A, which I admit is confusing and irritating, but it is what it is. Okay, so next we're going to talk about melody versus harmony. Now, a melody is a group of notes in sequence. When you think of pop music, a melody is often carried by the singer, who can only sing one note at a time. That's a melody. Now, a harmony, on the other hand, is a number of notes played at the same time, also known as a chord, and is often played on a chordal instrument like a piano or a guitar. Pop songs usually have both of these components. So here's a chord. There's a harmony part that's played in the background, and a singer will often sing a melody on top of that. This brings us to triads. A triad is a 3-note chord. Now, for each of the 7 distinct notes in a key, which we refer to by their scale degrees, there's an associated triad with that degree. So in the key of C, the first scale degree is C, scale degree 1. We refer to the triad built off of that scale degree as the 1 chord, and it sounds like this. That's the 1 chord. Now, the way that you build these triads is you start at a given point, starting on the C note, the first degree of the scale, and then you play subsequent scale degrees at the same time. Now, what you do is you don't play the next scale degree followed by the next scale degree. If you were to do that, it would sound like this, which is not a very pretty chord sound. What you do is you end up skipping one of the notes of the scale degree each time. So we play this one, we skip this next one, we play this one, we skip this next one, and you play this one. So for the scale degree 1 and the 1 chord, you play the first note in the scale, the third note in the scale, and the fifth note in the scale. 1, 3, 5. Now to build the triad for the 2 chord, you do the same thing. You start on the second degree of the scale, skip this degree, play this degree, skip this degree, play this degree. And you can see when I do that up here in the control bar area, you can see it names the chord I'm playing. D minor. Now, I don't want to get too far in the weeds here, but we're going to talk just a little bit about the quality of a chord. There are a number of terms we can use to describe a chord, but the two we'll focus on are major and minor. So a chord can have a quality of major or a quality of minor. Generally speaking, a major chord by itself sounds bright and happy. That's C major. Whereas a minor chord by itself sounds a bit sad. This is C minor. Now, what determines if a chord is going to be major or minor has to do with the distance in half steps from the root of the chord to the middle note of the triad. Now, in the case of C major, we play the first note of the scale, we skip the second note, we play the third note, and then we play the fifth note. 1, 3, 5. Now, the distance between the first scale degree and the third scale degree in this case is going to be 4 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what they call a major interval. Now, in this case, when we start on the second scale degree and we build our triad, we play the second scale degree, we skip the third scale degree, play the fourth scale degree. Now, this is a minor interval because there's only a distance of 1, 2, 3 half steps between the first note and the second note in the chord. And this is just a consequence of how the major scale is laid out on the piano. Now, it's totally okay if you didn't get all of that. The key upshot is that there are major chords which sound happy and there are minor chords which sound sad. And for a given key, like the key of C major here, there are 7 chords that you get to use that are based on the 7 degrees of the major scale, or the scale you're using. So 3 of these chords, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, are going to be major. Major, major, major. And the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord are going to be minor. So 3 of the chords are going to sound sad, 3 of the chords are going to sound happy. This 1 chord, the 7 chord, is a bit of an oddball. It's a diminished chord, and it sounds very distant. And this is sort of an advanced topic, so we're not going to get into how we're going to use the 7 chord. We're just not really going to use it for this talk. Now, you'll notice we have the scale degree here in the table, 1, followed by the Roman numeral for the scale degree. And you notice that in some cases, the Roman numeral is in uppercase letters, and in some cases, the Roman numeral is in lowercase letters. This is called Roman numeral analysis, and the uppercase Roman numerals are for major chords. The lowercase Roman numerals are for minor chords, and you often see them written out this way rather than using just the Arabic numerals here. I just threw that in there just in case, because it's something that you will run across. So chords are organized into sequences known as progressions, or chord progressions. Now, they're often referred to by their degrees, so you may have heard of a 1-4-5 progression. That's using the chord based on the first degree of the scale, the fourth degree of the scale, and the fifth degree of the scale. 1, 4, 5. And you notice that uses all of the major chords in the scale. It's a very happy progression, also known as the rock and roll chord progression. And it sounds a little bit like this. It's not uncommon for a chord progression to have just 3 chords in it. There's that oft-repeated phrase that country music is just 3 chords in the truth. Now, some chord progressions can be a lot longer than 3 chords. Now, for example, here below, I've sketched out Pachelbel's canon progression, and this was made famous in the 1970s, and it's a piece by Johann Pachelbel called Pachelbel's Canon in D. And I've transposed it to the key of C, but the basic progression is 1, 5, 6, 3, 1, 5, 6, 3, 4, 1, 4, 5. And this is kind of hard to play on a computer keyboard, but I'll give it a shot. And I'll start out with just playing the root notes first. And I've got the keyboard, the keys that you play on your keyboard to get it down below. Let's see if I can pull this off. And if I were to play each of these 3 notes of the chord, not at the same time, but in sequence, that's called arpeggiating the chord. And it doesn't quite sound like you're playing the chord at the same time. Like if I play the C chord by arpeggiating it, it would sound like, rather than. But because this is easier to do, I'm going to try to play Pachelbel's canon progression here on my computer keyboard by arpeggiating the notes in the chord. Here goes. You can almost hear the melody. Anyway, the key is that the Pachelbel's canon progression is a more advanced chord progression that is often used in popular music too, but it has 8 different chords in the chord progression. Now, the Pachelbel's canon progression is often shortened to something called the 4-chord pop progression, which is used in just a dizzying array of songs. It's incredibly common, and we're going to use that as the harmonic foundation of our song, since it is so incredibly common. And the reason it's common is it's a really great progression, and it goes like this. And you can almost hear some of the songs when I do that. It sounds like U2's With or Without You. There's just a ton of songs that use this chord progression. And there's this funny video that you can look up on YouTube, and it's by a band called The Axis of Awesome. And they do a fun sketch about this chord progression and how incredibly common it is. We're going to wrap up this section on practical music theory with a little bit about what's known as functional harmony, which is a way of thinking about what the various chords in a key, these 7 chords, what they're used for. In other words, how they function. What is their function? Now, we're not going to discuss the functions of all the chords, but we are going to touch on the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. Now, the 1 chord is also called the tonic chord, and it functions as the home chord, the root chord. It feels stable, restful, at peace. Now, often it's the first chord in a song or a progression, and it often is the last chord in a song. You can think of a chord progression as a journey. You start at home on the tonic, and you move to a new chord or two, and that develops some tension from being, far away from home. And then you release that tension by arriving back at home. Tension and release. All right, the next 2 chords I'm going to talk about are the 4 chord and the 5 chord. Now, unlike the 1 chord, the 4 chord and 5 chord, they add a bit of tension. Now, they're considered like the journey. And if you think of a chord progression as a journey where you start at home and you go somewhere and then you come back home and the song's over and you're happy you're back at home, the 4 and the 5 chords are those places that you can travel. Now, the 4 chord is less tense than the 5 chord. it represents sort of maybe a halfway marker. So you can go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord. And it doesn't seem that too far away, but if you then go to the 5 chord, you're a little bit tense, like you're a little bit like far from home. And the job of the 5 chord is to pull you back to the 1 chord. That's called a resolution. The resolution from 5 to 1, that's referred to as a cadence. The 4 chord, its job is to take you to the 5 chord. It's called the subdominant chord, or the 5 chord is called the dominant chord. So the subdominant chord functions as what they call a predominant. Its job is to take you farther down the path to the 5 chord. And that's going from the 4 to the 5, and then back to the 1. Now you can also go from the 4 chord straight back to the 1 chord, and that is another resolution. And that is, resolutions are also referred to as cadences. So there's a 4-1 cadence that goes. That's also known as the Amen cadence, or the plagal cadence. Amen. That's different from the 5-1 cadence, which is known as the authentic cadence. So those are the 3 chord functions I wanted to briefly touch on. The 4 chord, which can either take you to the 5 chord or back to the 1 chord, and then the 5 chord, also known as the dominant chord, whose main job is to drive you back to the 1 chord. And that's why you'll often see chord progressions end on a 5, because when they loop back around again, you're back on the 1. And the 5 to 1 cadence or resolution is a very, very satisfying cadence. And it makes it so when you play the progression back to back, you get that natural 5-1 cadence. Okay, that was quite a lot of music theory, so we're done with that for now. We've decided that we're going to use the 4-chord pop progression for our song. So what we're going to do now is lay down some bass. I like to add the bass after the drums, as both instruments usually work together to provide the backbone low end of the song. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to use the piano roll editor to compose a bass line for the song. So first of all, we need a bass instrument. So we're going to hit the new track here. And what we're going to do is select a software instrument and hit the create button. And you can see that by default, it wants to create this classic electric piano. We're going to go to bass, and we're going to pick the Liverpool bass. And then we're going to get rid of the library. Now, when we hit our musical typing, you can see the Liverpool bass is selected here. Now, when we hit notes in our musical typing, sounds like a bass. All right, now we're going to clean up some things. So we don't need the musical typing right now, so we're going to close this window. And we don't need this classic electric piano track, so we're going to delete this track. Now you can see we've got some controls, and when the bass track is selected, these controls allow you to configure some of the tone of the bass. If the drum track would be selected, these controls would allow you to configure some parameters about the drums. So we're going to select the bass track, and we don't really want to mess with any of these controls, so we're going to hit this button here to make them go away. Now we can focus on just the main tracks area. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a region in this Liverpool bass track. So we do that by holding down the command button, and you can see our mouse pointer here turns into a little pencil. And we click, and that creates this green region. Now, we can move our mouse to the corner of this box, the region, and you can see it turns into a double-headed arrow. This allows us to size the region. Now, if we have it up here at the top, the arrow is different. This is like a little recycle little sort of icon. And this means if we pull it here, we're just repeating this first 1 bar section, we're looping it n times. So this is looping it, but if we're down here, we're not looping, we're just expanding the size of the region. We're changing the length. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a 4-bar region. And this is where we're going to create the intro bass for the song. So now if we double click on this region, this is what's called the piano roll editor. And it lets us enter notes into the region. So let's bring up our notes. And you can see that the 4-chord progression we're going to use is 1, 5, 6, 4. And those are the notes C, G, A, and E. Now, this is a 4-chord progression. Let me zoom this out a little bit. This is a 4-chord progression, and this region lasts 4 bars. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the bass note, since this is a bass instrument, of each of these 4 chords, and we're going to just play them. So if we click here at the C2 range, this is going to be C, and once again we hold down our command key to turn it into a pencil, and it made a small little note right there at C2, and we're going to pick it up and size it. And now it is the length. It's an entire beat. Let's have it play for this entire beat. Actually, excuse me, that's an entire bar. We're going to have it play for one entire bar. So there's a C, and now we're just going to pick up this note, and now we're moving it. But if we hold down the Option key, now there's a little green plus sign that says we're not moving, we're copying. Option key goes away, and we're moving. Option key comes back, and we're copying. So now we're going to play the G, which is the 5 chord. I'm going to put it down, and then we're going to go over here, and then we're going to pick the 6 chord, which is an A. And then we're going to go back to the 4 chord, which is an F. So once again, holding the Option. And there's the F. All right, now if we play that, our bass goes. And it's playing the bass notes of our progression. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this volume slider down because we want it to be quieter in relation to the drums. Turn it down to about there. I'm going to show you another little thing. This is called the cycle region. So up here, we can click and we can drag. And this sets something called the cycle range. And we can pick it up and we can move it. We can expand it. We can expand it and we can contract it. This cycle range just says basically when you hit play, which is the space bar, it's going to cycle these first 4 bars. And when it gets to the end, it's going to wrap around. And you can turn it on and off by hitting the C key for cycle. So now that it's off, when it gets to the 5th bar, it's just going to keep going. I'm going to hit C to turn it back on. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take this region that we just made, and we're going to click on it, and we're going to hold down the Option key, and you can see we got the plus sign, and we're just going to copy it and snap it right next to the other one. And then we're going to take this cycle region, and we're going to move it over here. So now we've got 2 of these regions that are identical at this point, but we're going to edit the second region. And the reason we're editing the second region is because we want to add a little bit of variation on the second part of our intro. Variation sort of keeps things moving, and you don't want to be this too samey. It's good to move things along, so that's what we're going to do. So here's how we're going to add a little bit of variation. So you notice that there are 4 measures or 4 bars in the second section of the second half of the intro that we're working on, and we just play one note for the whole bar. what we want to do is we're going to break each one of these notes so they play on each beat. And you can see here, we're going to move our playhead. This is where you're playing. We're going to move the playhead here, and we're going to see that this breaks down into 4 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. What we're going to do is we're going to have each one of these notes. We're going to break up this one long-held note into 4 quarter notes. And the way we do that is we set our playhead here on these division lines, and we hit Command T. We select the note, and we hit Command T, and that splits it. And then we do the same thing when we put our playhead here, splits it. Splits it. Now, instead of one long-held note, we have 4 quarter notes. And we're going to do this to all of these notes. So go here, split. Oh, got to select it. Split, split, split. Oops, got to select it. Split, split, split. Select it. Split, split, split. Now it sounds different. We have a little bit of variation. Okay, that's good, but it could be better. Now, one of the problems we have here is, do you remember when I was talking about how the first beat of every measure has some emphasis on it? We're going to do that now. So if we select these notes, these individual notes, you can see that they all have a velocity of 80. And this velocity is like a 7-bit value. It goes from 1 up to 127. And instead of 80, we're going to select this note here, and we're going to bring it to about, how about 100? Now it's going to be slightly louder. So we're going to hear the first note of the measure being emphasized. And we're going to select all of these first notes of each of these measures, and we're going to put them to 100 as well. So now when we play it, we should hear a definite pulse at the start of the measure. That's definitely better. And sometimes they actually emphasize the third beat as well. So let's emphasize the third beat too, but we won't take it all the way to 100. Let's take it around to 90. So there'll be a pretty big emphasis on the first beat in the measure, and then slightly less emphasis on the other beats, but then again another little emphasis on the third beat. And let's see what that sounds like. All right, it's subtle, but that I think sounds better. Moving right along, what we're going to do now is we're going to grab this region, and we're going to move it over here. We're going to hold down the Option key to copy it. And we're going to move our cycle range over to the verse as well. And now what we're going to do is we're going to work on the bass line for the verse section. And once again, we're going to change things up to keep things fresh. And we're going to do what's called creating a walking bass line. And a walking bass line is where you arpeggiate the notes of the chord that are being played in the harmony in the bass. So as you can see, like we have these 4 chords that represent our chord progression. And the first note, or the root note in each one of these chords, is C, G, A, and F. And you can see here it's C, G, A, and F. Now we're just playing the root notes here. If we were to arpeggiate the chord, we know that the chord has the notes C, E, and G, and that represents the first scale degree, the third scale degree, and the fifth scale degree of starting at the degree 1. So that's 1, 3, 5. Now, when you're creating a walking bass line, you typically do a pattern like 1-3-5-3. So for us, this would be C, E, G, E. So let's do that. Let's go C, and let's move this note up to an E. And then we're going to take this to a G. And then we're going to take this to an E. So 1-3-5-3. And we're going to do the same thing for the next note in the chord, which is a G. G, B, and D. So this is G. I'm going to move this to a B. And we're going to take this to a D. And then we're going to go back to a B. 1-3-5-3. We're going to do the same for the sixth chord, which is A, C, E. So this is A. Move this up to a C. We're going to move this up to an E. Move this back up to a C. 1-3-5-3. And we're going to do the same thing for the final chord, F, A, C, which is the 4 chord. So it's already on F. We're going to move this to A. I'm going to move this to C. Move this to A. All right. Now, if we listen to that, if we just hit play, since the cycle region is on the first half of the verse, it's going to sound like this. And that sounds pretty good and pretty different. Now, we could refine this bass line further as we go on, but we're going to keep the walking bass line going through the rest of the song. And what we're going to do is we're just going to loop this 4-bar section for the rest of the song. And this is a little bit lazy, but we've got more parts of the song to cover, and we're gonna call this bass line done. We're gonna turn off the cycle region, and we're gonna listen to the transition between the verse and chorus just to kind of get a feel how that goes. See the drums pick up and change. All right, cool. Now we've got a 55-second song that's got some drums, and it's got a bass line. And the bass line defines our chord progression going forward. Now let's talk a little bit about how we're going to end the song. Typically, what you do is there are a couple different ways to end the song, but one of the easiest ways is to do what they call a fade out at the end, where, the song goes, and as it gets towards the end, it just gets quieter and quieter, sort of giving that feeling that the song is just going on forever. So we're going to see if we can use GarageBand here to create a fade out for us. And that'll help us figure out the end of the song. So if we type in fade, you see there's an option for a menu item on automation or in the mix section to create a volume fade on the main output. So let's do that. And what it's done here is it's created a master track, and it's created a little bit of what they call automation. And this button here is the automation button, and it shows and hides track automation. And if you click it, you can see that the automation has disappeared. And if you add it again, you can see the automation is back. And what this does is it automates the volume of the track down as time goes on. So about at this point in the chorus, the second chorus, it starts getting quieter and quieter. And it goes from its maximum volume here at 0 dB down to all the way down to negative infinity dB, which is silence. So if we kind of listen to the last chorus, this is what it sounds like. Okay, cool. And that really stops us from having to do anything complicated to end the song. And it gives us a nice song ending. So now what we're going to do is we're going to provide some of the harmony of the song. So we've started with the bass line, and the bass outlines the chord progression. But there's no real harmony content. There's all single notes. None of them are really overlapping. So we're going to fill in some of the chords of the chord progression. And we're going to do that by creating a new track. And we're going to create a software instrument. And now you can see that the electric piano is the default And the electric piano, I guess, sounds okay. But let's have a little fun. Let's get something maybe, I don't know, how about a vibraphone? Let's see what that sounds like. And if we bring up musical typing again, I don't know if I like that. What's a marimba sound like? I like that a little bit better. So let's have a marimba. And a marimba is a malleted instrument, and it can very easily play two notes at once. You've got your two hands that you're playing it with. So let's do that. Let's have the marimba come in right about the time that the bass starts getting a little bit busy. So let's have it come in here. And what we'll do is we're just going to pick up and drag this over here. And we're going to hold down the Option key so it's copied. And now we have a marimba part. And this marimba part, we double click on it, we can see the notes. It plays C, G, A, and F. Now the bass line here that we've got going on is at this point, it's just laying down the bass notes. It's going C, 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 G, A, F. So let's have the marimba play the other two notes of the chord. So let's go back to the marimba. And instead of playing the first note in the chord, let's bring back our notes. We're going to have the marimba play the second and third notes of the chord, or the third degree and fifth degree. So let's do that. So we need, since the bass is holding down the root, we're going to move this up to an E. And then we're going to click Option and drag it up to make a copy. And then we're going to have this go to a G. We're going to do the same over here. So the note is G, but we want to, this is the root, but we want to play the B and the D. So we're going to bring this up to a B. And then we're going to hold down the Option key and drag it to make a copy. And we're going to do a D. And then this is an A. Now the bass is holding down that A. So we're going to play the C and the E on the marimba. So let's go over here and let's drag this up to a C. And we're going to Option click, copy to an E. And then finally, we're also going to hold down the A and the C. So this is the bass note, which is the bass is playing. We're going to move it up to an A. And then hold down the Option key and then go to a C. Now, if we listen to this, we'll hear the marimba come in while the bass is hammering on the root notes. The marimba is playing the second and the third notes of the triad. So we should hear, with all three of these things going, a full chord. Okay, now let's add some more harmonic content. So I've recorded some guitar parts, and let's bring them into our project now. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new track, and this time we're going to say a guitar track, an audio track. We're going to hit create. So now we've got a guitar amplifier here, and it shows all of these different guitar sounds that we can choose from. So Brit and Clean is the default, and that's what we'll use. Now, on my laptop here, I do not have an audio interface, so I can't really record a guitar part, but I can bring one in that I've recorded previously from the Finder. So let me do that. Let me bring up the Finder, and let me go to my recents, and let's bring in the verse guitar part. And we just drag it here. The verses. And now I'm going to go back to the Finder and I'm going to bring in my chorus guitar part and I'll drag it here. And we're just going to loop this chorus section here. We're going to extend it out for another 8 bars. Okay, let's listen to what this sounds like. So pretty simple verse guitar part. And a different sort of rhythm on the chord progression for the chorus. And while this plays the chorus, let me fool around with some of these various amplifier presets so you can hear what they sound like. Pretty cool. But let's move back to our original setting, the Britain clean. And what we'll do is we'll select this Britain clean track and hit Command D. And Command D just duplicates the current track. And what we'll do is we'll move our chorus guitar down to this track. So we've separated our verse guitar and our chorus guitars onto separate tracks. And we can treat them differently. So if we want the chorus to sound a little bit bigger, we can select a different preset for it. Like we can do something like let's select double driven and hear how that sounds. Maybe that's a bit much. How about British Invasion? Maybe a little louder too. Just adjusting the track volume here. So that's the clean. And then we move into the chorus, we play a different rhythm pattern, and we switch to the British Invasion preset. We turn it up a little bit. Actually, I kind of like that. Maybe we'll do that instead. And we move from clean to sort of crunchier and kind of phasey. All right, cool. Now, we have 2 choruses to work with. Let's add a little something to the second chorus to make it stand out. And what we can do is we can add another track and maybe add a software instrument. And we're not going to pick the classic electric piano. We're going to add a synthesizer, and we're going to go to the pad section. And a synthesizer pad is kind of like some ambient sound that plays during a section to kind of pad it out. So we're going to pick the classic analog pad. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to the Liverpool bass, and we're going to drag it over here on the second chorus. And we're going to hold down the Option key to copy it. We're going to make another copy because we're going to change it up slightly towards the end. And let's rename this. Just call it pad. And let's hear how this sounds now. The pad might be kind of loud. We may have to adjust the volume on it a little bit. If we hit this button, it solos the pad. You can hear what that sounds like. And then when the pad gets a little bit bigger, what we'll do is instead of just playing single notes, we'll expand this out to chords. So instead of just playing the C note, we can copy this note And we can do C, E, G. Oops. Copy this note. So that creates the C chord rather than the C note. And we'll do the same thing here for the G. We'll go G, B, D. We'll do the same here for the 6th chord, A, C, E. And finally, we'll do the same for the 4 chord, F, A, C. Let's hear how this sounds now. Bigger pad sound. And there we go. So now the whole arrangement, we can start at the intro. And I'm going to turn down the master volume a little bit so you can hear me talk while this plays. Just got the drums and a little bit of bass. Bass gets a little busier and the marimba comes in. The second half of the intro. Then we get to the verse. Get a little guitar. Marimba stays there. And here we go into the chorus. Guitar changes, pattern changes. And as we hit the second chorus, pad comes in. Pad expands, and the song fades and ends. Now at this point we've got the rhythmic content, the drums. We've got the bass that outlines the chord progression. We've got a little bit of chordal content here in the marimba. It's playing on the 3s and 5s while the bass holds down the 1. And then we've got the verse guitar, which is, some harmonic content. Got the chorus guitar, more harmonic content, playing the chord progression at the same time that the bass is outlining the chord progression. And then finally, we pad out the last chorus with a somewhat simple synth pad going to a sort of bigger, fuller synth pad at the end as the chorus builds and builds to the end and before finally fading at the song end. So now all you need to do to sort of complete this song is to write some lyrics and to sing a melody on top of it. And so then you've got your rhythm, your harmony, and your melody, and you're done. Now, doing that last part, I'll leave as an exercise to the reader. I will provide you guys with this particular GarageBand project that you can mess with, and you can come up with your own song lyrics and song idea for the vocals and the lyrics. And I'll share with you guys what I did in a project after this video. You can check it out later. All right, that's the end of the talk. Thank you for listening.